The Supreme Court has ruled that a group of Uber drivers must be treated as workers rather than self-employed, a decision which means they could be entitled to a minimum wage and holiday pay.
On Friday the 18th of February, the Supreme Court announced its judgment on the case Uber v Aslam, rejecting Uber's appeal and declaring that two of its drivers, Yaseen Aslam and James Farrar, must be classified as workers. This was the end of 5 years of legal challenges, with Uber taking its appeal to the highest court in the land. For Yaseen Aslam, it was 7 years in the making, and he finds it hard to articulate his thoughts and emotions that day.
Well, I mean, it is a long, hard day, even though the whole state, even since we won in 2016, I was always confident we're going to win. Yeah, but in the back of the head, there's still a bit of uncertainty what's going to happen, and this Supreme Court will make or break. It's like we're either going to win or we're going to lose, and if we lose, we're damned. It puts us back to square one. Like, this is 7 years of my life. I mean, it's just so hard to describe because everything happens so quickly and so fast. But I still remember, when they were playing and we were watching it outside, and the justice said, appeal dismissed. But up to then, my mind was preoccupied. We were getting calls coming in from media, and I wanted to keep myself preoccupied because, like I said, we're average people. It's all about emotions, everything. And one of the things is never show weakness. And even though we had our ups and downs, it's always about staying positive. So my way around that was not to think about it and try and work. But the minute we heard appeal dismissed,
Supreme Court unanimously dismisses Uber's appeal.
I looked at James quickly, and then, yeah. It is yes. Yeah. And we're just yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I just can't find a word to describe it.
I'm Robbie Waring, and this is the Fairwork podcast, a dive into the lives of the people working within the gig economy. This episode looks at contracts, and in it, we hear from Yaseen Aslam, the former Uber driver who successfully took them to court over his classification as a self-employed independent contractor. A ruling that has implications for the gig economy around the world. The interviews for this episode took place in two parts, one before the final ruling and one immediately after. In it, we hear Yaseen's personal account of what it is like taking on a multinational corporation, organising gig workers in the UK, and what made him do it.
My name's Yaseen Aslam, so I'm one of the claimants against Uber, which we filed in 2015. So I actually come into this industry back in 2006 when I was made redundant in my IT job. Uber arrived in the UK in 2012. That's when I first registered with them.
Yaseen was one of the first 100 drivers to sign up for the Uber platform when it first came to London. And at the time, he and many other drivers just didn't think it would work.
It was we just didn't understand how they're going to do it without a human. How is this app going to work?
But many drivers were excited about the potential impact that these new technologies held and their ability to make the distribution of work fairer.
One of the problems we had at the traditional cab office was there was a human, like a controller, who would dispatch jobs to you. There's a favoritism system. And what we find in this industry is there's a lot of discrimination. One of the things that really attract people to Uber was the fact that there is no controller. And you just, you just turn the app on, you work when you want, you go home when you want. So it's that element of flexibility and the freedom. So I didn't really face too much problem at the previous cab office. But there were a lot of drivers that, had it hard. And you'll get a lot of controllers where they request a driver buy them cigarettes, buy them a doner kebab or something, So if you weren't doing that, they'll just make your day hard. They'll give you shit jobs. So the point was, if you could get the controller on side and you're willing to feed the controller, you'll get looked after. Where when you come over to Uber, is a completely different system. There's no favoritism and stuff like that.
In the beginning, Yaseen didn't fully grasp the implications surrounding Uber's use of technology. nor its potential impacts on the private hire market.
But yeah, I mean, the point is, when we first started, and yeah, it just clicked. So for me, it was nothing different. It was just another cab office just giving me work to do. That's the way I saw it. But the good thing about this was I was in control. I didn't have to tell them that I'm coming to work at this time or I want to go home at this time. Yeah. Or, like someone ringing me saying, put your foot down, we're running late, we've got so many jobs waiting, hurry up. Like that kind of stuff. I didn't have all that. So I was in that was, to me, was a good element. And that's what attracts a lot of drivers to it. But what we found is over time is all that thing, the control element started changing. We then started seeing the other side. And that was like, look, we're running away from all these humans. But we're now being controlled by an app, a technology, and all these algorithms. So, for example, when I picked up a passenger, he would rate me 5 stars. So in order to stay on the platform, I have to maintain a high rating. So just to give you an average example, to stay on Uber X platform, you need to have a rating of 4.4. We were getting drivers getting deactivated because someone left them a bad feedback. So we're now at a mercy of the rating system. So that's like a pressure on us indirectly, which we didn't realize, and we started seeing afterwards. What we saw, so although we're running away from the human controller saying this is better, what we're now seeing is a hidden human behind the app controlling us and doing things to make us work a certain way.
This creeping sense of control and the power that the app played in shaping the lives of workers would lay the groundwork for his subsequent legal case. Yaseen says there were numerous points where it became increasingly prevalent that the freedom he felt had limits. One evening, on a busy night in London, Yaseen received a request at 1 a.m. to pick up 3 men outside a bar.
Now, they were quite drunk. As soon as they got into the car, they made some kind of a racist comment towards me. And I because I got this experience of driving and dealing with customers, you sort of could tend, and I'd rather not go ahead if I could, because it's sort of like a gut feeling. So I knew this is going to escalate. So anyway, I just was very polite to those guys. I said, look, yes, if you could, I'm happy to drop you off from wherever you're going, but I just need you to be polite. And that's it. So as we were driving towards Fulham High Street, they just carried on giving me abuse one after another. So I knew that if I carry on driving, especially once we get out of, these built-up areas, and if something did kick off or something happened, I was all alone. I'm in my car alone with 3 people, and there's no one to help me in any shape or form. So it's always best to end the journey and stop it in an area where at least I could get some help if I needed to, yeah? So I stopped on the high street because you got cameras everywhere, so you're being watched and everything is okay. So I told these guys that, look, I'm refusing to take you because of your behavior. And I got out of my car and they wouldn't leave.
Yaseen called the police and the men finally left, after which he contacted Uber to tell them about the incident and why he cancelled the trip.
Uber then come back to me saying, you can't do that. You can't. Basically, what they're trying to say is I kick people out of my car, and if I ever do it again, I will be dismissed from the platform. So there's me, potentially trying to, limit my damage, and I'm getting warned for, for doing something that potentially could have, I could have got beaten up or something bad could have happened. But I just done what my gut feeling was refused to take them further. Yeah, and they were welcome to book another cab and carry on from there. But I'm getting warned for doing that.
As Yaseen became aware of the issues that many drivers were facing, he started to actively campaign for the rights of him and his fellow drivers, forming an association of drivers in 2014 before joining GMB Union in 2015. But his actions didn't go unnoticed by Uber. One day in 2015, as he began the drive from his home in High Wycombe into central London, he reached for his phone and opened the Uber app, as he had done countless times before.
And I tried to log on, and it wouldn't let me. So I thought maybe it might be an app problem or a glitch or something. So I carried on driving all the way into London. Then I stopped again, then tried it again, and I kept on trying. And then I stopped like once I got to central London and it didn't work. So that like technically an hour waited. And I emailed Uber saying, look, I can't log on, what's happening? But so then I drove back home again. But, like in my head, I was thinking like, I need the money because I needed the money that week. I took 3 days off and I was back to work for that day. But I wasn't told that I'd been blocked from the app. I got deactivated. So when I first got deactivated, I didn't do anything wrong. I got deactivated for my campaigning. So, like it put A, I was financially, I needed that money. And B, it's that stress, like what's happening? Why can't I log in? What did I do? What did I do wrong? Did the customer make a complaint against me? Like all that kind of sort. But I can't remember, like it's hard to explain at the motion, but it's like you just suddenly, like you went to work and the door's locked or they changed the lock at your workplace and you can't get in. So I then arranged to meet one of the managers. So I went back into Uber's office a week later. So the whole week I couldn't work. So I went into Uber's office. I had a good long chat with the manager saying, look, come on, what did I do wrong? And it is more like their way of trying to intimidate me to say, look, what you're doing is you're making good money. You're doing all right. So why are you causing problems? You should just get on, put your head down and work and you'll be okay. But if you're going to do, if you're going to be concerned about other drivers and stuff like that, you're going to lose your access, yeah? And I didn't like the way they sort of threatened me, and that was their way to sort of send me a strong message, yeah? So if anything, when I walked out that meeting, I was even more motivated to do what I was doing, to help drivers, because I just didn't like the way they're trying to bully me.
Alongside the threats he received from Uber, Yaseen was spurred on by what he saw around him and the stories he heard from other drivers. He saw many of his friends be deactivated and lose all or part of their livelihood. But what really hit home was the massive imbalance of power between drivers and the platform, and the total lack of protections afforded to drivers in the face of countless cases of passengers abusing drivers.
What really concerned me, which was close to heart for me, was there's a lot of racism attack toward drivers and abuse. So in a nutshell, you could sit in my car, call me call me whatever you want, refer to my skin color, give me as much abuse as you want. And then at the end of the journey, you could then put a 1-star and write a comment saying, this was the worst driver ever and I want a full refund. Yeah, and there's me that suffered all this abuse from you, and maybe even physically assaulted by you. And then Uber's telling me we'll have to give a refund to this customer because, he made a complaint. I had no and that is like, to me, like, look, this can't be right.
One particular story sticks out to Yaseen, when he got a call from a driver he knew who had been physically assaulted, and he drove round to his house to pay him a visit.
Yeah, so I went to see this guy, 60 years old, who got assaulted by a passenger late night, and the police did come onto the scene and he's reported it to the police. But then Uber sort of failed to cooperate with the police. And when I spoke to the driver again, I went to see him again down his house. He had a swollen up eye. I asked him what's happening, and he said, look, the police can't get hold of the passenger because Uber haven't given him the details, and so I just don't have the time to go and chase up the police. So I said, look, come on, this is not right. I'll go with you and let's report it and let's push the police and try and get something done, because you can't have a person assault you and then get away with it. I mean, it's not right. But he turned around, and they still sit in my head the way he said it, and he said it in our language. He's the same guy, a Pakistani guy, and he called me like son. He referred to me as son, and he said, son, this is part of my job, so if we're gonna get punched and abused, and the way he said it, and it still sits in my bed, like, look, this is not our job to get assaulted. It's not something we should be putting up with, yeah. And that's a lot of people sort of live with that assumption, thinking it's okay to receive abuse, it's okay to get physically attacked in their job, and it's okay, but it's not okay. And the reason they have that mindset is the lack of support from the police, lack of support from operators like Uber. You know, so they're happy to turn a blind eye to that. You know, so they're happy to allow that kind of abuse, and that's what we've been highlighting, and that's my passion really about this. That got me really eager. So I then started, every time I heard of a driver, I would write to Uber saying, look, what action are you taking against this rider? And they would never come back. Yeah, but the point was they didn't really care, and that was the ticking point for me.